I'm Amelia, 32 years old, and I never thought the defining moment of my life would come not from love or loss, but from betrayal. The kind that doesn't just sting, it rewrites your entire history. When I stood in that glass-walled boardroom, watching my father lie through his teeth while my brother nodded along, I realized something painful and freeing. They never saw me as family. Just a tool. A pawn. A backup plan. But before I take you into that room, you need to understand how I got there. How the girl who was always told to stay quiet, be grateful, and let your brother lead, became the woman who would own everything they tried to steal. I was born into a family where appearances were everything. My father, Richard Connors, ran a real estate empire with the swagger of a man who thought he could buy his way into heaven. My mother, Isabel, was a graceful, brittle ornament, always polished, always presentable, and always silent when it mattered most. Then there was my brother, Damien. 2 years older. My father's pride and joy, and then, there was me. From the outside, we were the perfect family. Press features in glossy magazines, charity events with staged smiles, holiday cards that looked like a country club ad. But inside our marble and mahogany home, the rules were unspoken yet absolute. Damien is always right, Amelia is always wrong, and if Amelia ever forgets that, she'll be reminded. My earliest memory of this came when I was 8. I had written a poem for a school contest, poured my little heart into it, and won. I remember bursting into the living room with the certificate, expecting hugs and praise. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. Did Damien win anything? He asked. He didn't enter, I replied, confused. Then don't make a big deal out of it, he said. We don't compete in this family. But we did. Every day. I just wasn't told I was playing a game I was meant to lose. In high school, I quietly built a world for myself, books, writing, debate club. Damien, meanwhile, racked up football trophies and girls. At dinner, my father would beam as Damien recounted his touchdowns, while I was barely asked how my day went. When I got into Stanford with a full scholarship, my dad barely grunted. Probably got in because of your essay. Not like you had the grades or connections. I did. But facts never mattered in our house. Perception did. Stanford was my escape. My first real taste of independence. I majored in economics, minored in psychology, and built a reputation for being smart, reliable, and, most importantly, not my family. I interned every summer, built connections, and by the time I graduated, I had 3 job offers lined up. But then came the call. We need you back, Amelia, my father said. The family business is growing. Damien's going to need support. Support. That word again. Not leadership. Not partnership. Support. I should have said no. I wanted to. But guilt is a powerful thing, especially when you've been conditioned your whole life to believe that being helpful is the only way to earn love. So I came back. I joined Connors Holdings at 24, buried myself in analytics, risk management, and eventually, quietly, grew a side branch of the company focused on sustainable urban development. While Damien chased big flashy deals and charm-based negotiations, I built real systems. My branch became profitable within 2 years. By year 3, it was the only part of the business not bleeding money, and still. When investors came, they met with Damien. When press arrived, it was Damien who gave the tour, and when my father spoke about his legacy, it was Damien's name he invoked. You're doing good work, my father said once, in the elevator. After a quarterly review where I'd saved the company nearly $2.3 million. Just, try not to outshine your brother. That was the story of my life. Succeed quietly. Shine only in the shadows, until one day, a call came in that changed everything. It was from an anonymous source. A whistleblower. They claimed Damien had been using shell companies to funnel investor money into personal accounts. That he'd been falsifying reports, using my branch's clean numbers to offset massive losses from his real estate flips. Gone. Wrong. I froze, not because I was surprised, but because deep down, I knew something like this was inevitable. Damien was reckless. Entitled. He'd never been told no, never had to clean up his messes. I had, over and over again. The difference was this time, the mess was criminal. And my name was on some of those documents. That night, I drove to my father's estate. Walked past the manicured hedges and Italian fountain that looked like something from Versailles. I found him in his study, swirling a glass of scotch like he was auditioning for a cigar ad. I know about the shell accounts, I said, voice steady. He didn't flinch. Just looked at me with that cold, calculating gaze. So? So? I repeated. This is fraud. Damien could go to jail. I could go to jail. You won't, he said. Because you're going to fix it. I stared at him. We'll move the numbers. Shift some assets. Delay the audits. You know how to do that, don't you? You're good at this behind-the-scenes work. My hands went cold. You're asking me to commit a crime, I whispered. I'm asking you to protect your family, he said. Something you've always said you wanted. And that's when I realized, I wasn't their daughter. I was their insurance policy, but what they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that I'd been documenting everything. Every shady transfer. Every faked report. Every meeting Damien had begged me to sign off on. I had receipts, and for once in my life, I wasn't going to be silent. I left my father's estate that night feeling a kind of clarity I'd never experienced before. There was no more confusion, no more hoping they would change. No more waiting for the love I'd never receive. Instead, there was something else, resolve. For years, I had been the fixer. The one who quietly absorbed blame, patched the cracks, kept the house of cards upright. But this time, I wasn't going to clean up their mess. I was going to burn the whole thing down, on my terms. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Sylvia Chong, a corporate attorney with a steel trap memory and zero tolerance for bullshit. She'd helped me negotiate contracts for my urban development branch and once told me, if anyone ever tries to screw you over, call me before you cry. I called her. She didn't ask why I sounded dead calm at 7 a.m. She just said, talk. I told her everything. The fraud. The forged signatures. The money being laundered through subsidiaries that were tied, on paper, to my department. I've been documenting for months, I said. I didn't know exactly what Damien was doing, but I knew something was off. So I tracked it. Sylvia's voice was tight with focus. Are you listed as an officer or stakeholder on any of those shell companies? Not directly. But the filings make it seem like my department approved the budgets. She was silent for a beat. Then, we need to go nuclear. I was thinking the same thing. The second call was to my assistant, Maya. She'd worked with me for 4 years and was the only person in the company I trusted implicitly. I told her to pack up my files from the office, all personal items, and send them to my apartment. Then, I asked her to scan the security logs, tell me if there's any irregular activity, accessing my email, my reports, anything that seems off. She didn't hesitate. You think they're trying to set you up? I don't think, I replied. I know. The third call was to a friend I hadn't spoken to in a while, Carlos Vega, a journalist at the Chronicle who specialized in corporate corruption. I knew him from Stanford. We'd collaborated once on a research piece about ethics in finance. He had a reputation for being relentless and airtight with sources. I told him I had a story. I can't go on record. Not yet, I said. But I have evidence. Documents. A timeline. And if I disappear from the narrative, you'll know why. Jesus, Amelia, he muttered. What are we talking? Fraud? Embezzlement? Try $18 million. Hidden accounts. Faked audits. And a legacy. Company built on lies. There was a long pause. Okay, he said finally. Let's meet. By noon, I had encrypted every file on my personal laptop, uploaded copies to a private cloud, and given Sylvia a key to access it if anything happened to me. I wrote a statement of intent, time-stamped, notarized, and locked in her hands. Then, I waited. Sure enough, it didn't take long for my father and Damien to make their move. That afternoon, I was summoned to an emergency board meeting. It's about Q2 discrepancies, the email read. Urgent. I knew better. They were going to throw me under the bus. They just didn't realize I'd already built the road. When I walked into the boardroom, it was all polished wood and quiet menace. My father sat at the head of the table, Damien on his right. A few nervous-looking board members scattered along the sides. And me, alone on the left, like I had wandered into the lion's den on accident. Richard gave me a tight smile. Amelia. Glad you could join us. I sat down without responding. We've discovered some irregularities in the reports coming out of your department, he continued, his voice falsely calm. Certain budget approvals that were never cleared by finance. Unauthorized allocations. Shell companies were unable to trace. How strange, I said, folding my hands. I wonder how that happened. My brother leaned forward, frowning. In performative concern. We think someone may have been using your credentials. Forging your approvals. The audacity, you mean Damien? I said, my tone sharp. Because if you're going to lie, at least be specific. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. My father's jaw clenched. We're not accusing you, Amelia. But we do need to contain this before it reaches investors. Too late, I said coolly. I've already submitted documentation to our legal counsel and initiated an external audit. Also, a journalist from the Chronicle will be reaching out to your office later today. I gave him a full breakdown. The silence was immediate and total. My father stood slowly. You did what? I protected myself, I said. Something. You never did. You're destroying this company, our family legacy. No, I replied. You did that when you used your daughter as a scapegoat for your son's crimes. Damien finally snapped. You ungrateful little. Finish that sentence, I said, standing now, my voice calm but loud. Finish it in front of the board. Let them hear who you really are. He shut his mouth. I turned to the rest of the room. For 10 years, I built the only part of this company that actually turned a profit. While they used my numbers to cover their losses. I'm not going to prison so Damien can keep playing CEO in front of a camera. I picked up my bag. Oh, and one more thing, check the server logs. You'll find files deleted under Damien's login credentials. Around 3 a.m. last Tuesday. Sylvia has screenshots. And with that, I walked out. I walked out of that boardroom into silence. Not just the kind that fills the air when no one knows what to say, but the kind that comes right before the storm. I could feel eyes on me as I made my way through the hallway. Assistants pretending not to stare. Interns suddenly busy with their phones. People sensed something had shifted, but no one knew yet that the woman they used to overlook had just detonated a bomb at the heart of the company, and I wasn't done. By the time I reached the parking garage, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Sylvia. Maya. Carlos. Even one of the board members, Robert Crane, a man who never once remembered my name during meetings, was suddenly calling me directly. I ignored them all. My first stop was Maya's apartment. She texted me earlier that she had something I needed to see. When I arrived, she opened the door with wide eyes and a USB drive in her hand. I pulled the building's internal camera footage, she said. You were right, someone was in your office after hours. She plugged the drive into her laptop and showed me. The grainy footage wasn't high resolution, but it was clear enough. Damien. Entering my office at 2:53 a.m., swiping his master keycard. Sitting at my desk, typing. Then printing something, stuffing papers into a folder, and leaving. I leaned back, arms folded. They're going to claim it was an emergency document transfer. Maya smirked. Already thought of that. Look at the file name on the screen. She paused the footage. The screen read, Amelia_Q2_revised.xls, edited by Damien. Connors. I exhaled. That's the nail. Maya looked at me seriously. They're going to come after you now. You know that? Right? I'm counting on it. Because when people like my father feel power slipping, they don't reflect or apologize, they retaliate. And I needed them to try. I needed them to go low, because I had already laid the trap. Sylvia had filed a motion with the board's ethics committee by noon, citing evidence of internal misconduct and requesting a formal investigation. The moment the investigation began, neither Richard nor Damien would be able to access company funds without oversight. Their accounts would be flagged. Their emails monitored. Everything they thought they controlled would slip away, and still. The part that hurt most wasn't the fraud, or the betrayal, or even the public spectacle I knew was coming. It was that I had been willing, for so long, to be quiet. I had swallowed their disrespect, minimized my own talents, and convinced myself that peace was worth the cost of self-erasure. I had called it keeping the family together. But family doesn't ask you to disappear so they can shine. That evening, I met Carlos at a quiet bar tucked behind a bookstore downtown. He was already seated at a corner table, laptop open, a legal pad covered in scribbles beside him. He looked up and blinked. Are you okay? I sat down. That depends. Do you believe in justice? He snorted. I'm a journalist in 2025. I believe in documentation. Good, I said, and handed him the external hard drive. This has everything. Copies of emails, financial transfers, timelines, even the footage of Damien entering my office. I want the truth out. But not yet. Carlos tilted his head. What's the play? They're going to try and bury me, I said. They'll paint me as unstable, emotional, a disgruntled employee. My father already told the board I was overwhelmed and taking some time off. Carlos grimaced. Classic. I want them to make their move, I continued. And when they do, I want the truth to drop like a thunderclap. You'll have exclusive access when it's time. He leaned back. You know this is going to destroy them. I met his eyes. No. I'm not destroying them. I'm just refusing to let them destroy me. After I left the bar, I walked the long way home. Past the old city library where I used to read as a kid. Past the corner cafe where I'd studied for college entrance exams. I was walking through the life I had built in spite of them, and now, finally, I was protecting it. The next morning, it began. A statement was released by Connors Holdings, due to recent concerns regarding internal discrepancies. Amelia Connors will be taking a personal leave of absence to address health matters. We thank her for her service and wish her well. Health matters. They didn't even have the courage to name what they were accusing me of. Just enough implication to plant seeds. Just enough cowardice to protect themselves, but they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated how many people had been watching. Listening. Waiting. At 9:43 a.m., an anonymous whistleblower leaked a batch of documents to the press, damning spreadsheets, email chains, and the security footage of Damien in my office. At 10:17, Carlos released a full article on the Chronicle's front page titled, "Sister's Silence: How the Real Brains Behind Connor's Holdings Got Burned." It went viral within an hour, and suddenly, I wasn't the shadow anymore. I was the storm. By lunchtime, my name was trending on social media, hashtag Amelia Connors, hashtag Connors cover-up, hashtag Damien did it. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my apartment, curled up on the couch with a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from former classmates, colleagues, and even total strangers. "I always wondered why your department had the only clean numbers. Girl, you carried that company and they tried to erase you. You're the real CEO." I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. Not yet. Because the truth wasn't just about justice. It was about survival. My survival. And I wasn't safe until the entire rot was exposed. At 1:07 p.m., Sylvia called. "They're panicking," she said. "Richard tried to issue a gag order, but too many documents have already gone public. The SEC just opened a preliminary investigation." "Good," I replied. "Let them scramble." "And Damien? Where is he?" There was a long pause. "He tried to delete his company email account. IT caught it and locked him out. He's blaming everything on you. Claims you were running a rogue operation." I laughed, bitterly. "Of course. Because he's never faced consequences in his life." "Not yet," Sylvia said. "But it's coming." That afternoon, the board convened an emergency session, this time, without my father or Damien present. The vice chairman, Eleanor Price, reached out to me directly. She'd always been quiet in meetings, but I remembered her eyes, sharp, watchful, waiting for her moment. "She had found it, Miss Connors," she said over the call. "I've reviewed the evidence. There's no doubt you've been wrongfully implicated. I want you to know, this board stands with you." I didn't respond immediately. I needed to be sure this wasn't just damage control. "And what happens now?" I asked. "We've launched a full internal audit. Effective immediately. Richard and Damien Connors are suspended from all operations pending investigation. And the board would like to offer you the interim CEO position." I blinked. It was everything I had built for. Everything I had been denied, and yet, no, I said quietly. Eleanor was stunned. "No? Not yet," I clarified. "I'll consider it, but only under certain conditions." She waited. "First, full transparency. I want my own compliance team, independent of the board." "Agreed." "Second, a public retraction of the health leave statement. I want a press conference. And I want the apology to come from the board, not just legal." Eleanor nodded. "Done." "And third," I said, voice cold now, "I want full access to my father's and brother's records. Every file. Every email. Every transaction." "That may require legal clearance," she warned. "Then get it," I said. I wasn't asking. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. About restoring everything that had been stolen, my name, my work, my legacy. By 4 p.m., Connors Holdings released a new public statement. "We deeply regret the prior messaging regarding Amelia Connors. Ms. Connors has demonstrated the utmost integrity and professionalism under impossible circumstances. The board fully supports her, and effective immediately, she will assume the role of interim CEO while we complete our internal investigation." It wasn't justice yet, but it was power. And this time, it was mine. I spent that evening at the office. Alone. Sitting in the very boardroom where they had tried to bury me. I opened the blinds, letting the city lights pour in. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I had finally stopped waiting for someone to save me, and realized I'd been holding the sword the entire time. By the end of the week, I was sitting at the head of the boardroom table, not as an observer, not as a reluctant support system, but as the woman in charge, interim CEO. 3 words I never thought I'd hear associated with my name. The first day back, I walked into Connors Holdings wearing a navy blue suit and a calm, focused expression. I didn't need to speak loudly. My presence was loud enough, everyone noticed. I passed by the same assistants who used to call me Miss Connors, with a polite smile, and then rushed to refill Damien's coffee. Now, they stood when I entered. They looked me in the eyes. Some even nodded with silent respect. The entire energy had shifted, and I knew why. Power doesn't just change the game, it changes the room, but I also knew power without purpose is just noise. So I got to work. The first thing I did was bring in an external audit firm with no ties to the family. I gave them access to everything, yes, even my own files. I had nothing to hide. The second thing I did was meet with every department head, one-on-one. I asked them what they'd been afraid to say under my father and Damien. Their answers were sobering. "We've been fudging numbers because we were told to meet impossible targets." Damien used to approve budgets off the books. He threatened to fire me when I questioned it. You were the only one who knew what was really happening. Each time, I thanked them. And each time, I made a note that I didn't plan to just survive. This moment, I planned to rebuild from the ground up, but not everyone was on board. 3 days into my leadership, I received a letter delivered by hand from my father's lawyer. It was short, aggressive, and filled with legal jargon designed to sound like thunder. If Connors Holdings does not cease its public statements regarding Richard Connors' suspension, legal action will be taken for defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and personal damages. I folded the letter carefully, set it on my desk, and smiled. I called Sylvia. Let's go public with the video. You're sure? She asked. That's your ace. I'm sure, I said. They want to play dirty? Let's remind them who they're dealing with. That evening, we released a short, edited clip of Damien entering my office at 2:53 a.m. alongside audit logs showing the deleted files and the forged approvals. No voiceover. No accusations. Just facts. Within 2 hours, 3 more investors pulled out of Damien's personal holdings. One of the Connors Holdings partners, someone who had stood beside my father for 20 years, issued a press statement of support for me. The tide was turning, but the most unexpected call came the next morning. Amelia, a quiet voice asked. I recognized it instantly. My mother. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Years, really, if we're measuring honesty over civility. I saw the news, she said. I didn't know it was that bad. Yes, you did, I said softly. You just didn't want to see it. There was silence on the line. I want to see you, she said. I want to talk. I closed my eyes. The little girl in me wanted to say yes, but the woman I'd become wasn't ready. I'll think about it, I said. Okay, she whispered. I'm proud of you, you know. For a second, I almost believed her, but pride without protection, without support, without action, it meant nothing. When the call ended, I looked around my office. Mine, not Damien's. Not my father's, and for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding myself. The following week was a blur of back-to-back meetings, press calls, legal filings, and quietly cleaning up the wreckage my father and brother had left behind. Each morning, I woke before sunrise, made strong black coffee, and stood on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the city skyline, watching as light slowly pushed away the dark. It felt metaphorical, because that's what I was doing now. Pushing away the years of silence. The manipulation. The lies. One truth at a time. The internal audit uncovered even more than I expected. There were off-the-book bonuses issued to Damien's friends posing as consultants. A misappropriated foundation fund that was supposed to support affordable housing, but instead paid for yacht parties under client relations. And, worst of all, evidence that my father's team had used insider knowledge to buy up failing real estate just before bankruptcy announcements. It was massive and damning. Sylvia put it bluntly, if this goes to court, Richard and Damien could face real prison time. I didn't flinch. I didn't cheer either. I wasn't looking for blood. I was looking for accountability, but accountability isn't something people like my father hand over willingly. On Thursday, a security guard stopped me in the building lobby. Ma'am, Mr. Richard Connors is here to see you. Says he has a right to his office. I almost laughed. Tell him the only thing he has a right to is a defense attorney, I replied. Later that day, I found a letter slid under my office door. No envelope. Just a single sheet of heavy paper, written in my father's clean, meticulous handwriting. Amelia, what you're doing is reckless. You're burning down a legacy you were supposed to inherit. Do you really think the board will stand by you forever? You're a temporary solution, not the real leader of this company. I built this from nothing. You've built nothing but enemies. Walk away now, and I might still protect you. R.C.It was his last weapon, fear. He'd used it my whole life. Posing it as advice. Wrapping it in promises, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I folded the letter, placed it in a file marked Leverage, Phase 2, and went back to work. That weekend, I received a different kind of message, this time, from an old friend. Hey stranger, the text read. I saw your name in Forbes. CEO, huh? I always knew you were the smart one. It was Drew. We hadn't spoken since grad school. He was now an environmental architect based in Portland. Back then, we were inseparable, late-night study sessions, debates over ethics and impact investing, and long walks where neither of us admitted we were falling for each other, but timing was never right. And now, the world was different. I was different. I texted back, smart doesn't always mean brave. Took me long enough to be both. Hope you're well. His reply was immediate, maybe we were both just waiting for the right version of ourselves to show up. I stared at the screen, maybe, but first, I had to finish this fight. On Monday, I stood in front of the entire company, all departments gathered in the central atrium. Some employees had worked under my father for decades. Others had joined because of Damien's promises. A few, like Maya, had quietly believed in me all along. I stood at the podium with no teleprompter, no cue cards, just my voice, and I spoke the truth. I know trust has been broken here. I know many of you are scared, angry, or confused. You were sold a story about this company that turned out to be fiction. A pause, and I know I've been invisible to many of you for far too long. But I'm not invisible anymore. And neither are the people who actually made this company work. From the ground up. I looked around the room. I will not promise perfection. I will not promise easy. What I promise is this: transparency, accountability, and rebuilding, together. If that's something you want to be part of, stay. If not, I won't chase anyone. Silence, then, one by one, people clapped. A slow, rising wave of hands meeting palms. Not out of politeness, but out of something real, respect, and just like that, I knew, this wasn't a temporary title. I wasn't holding the seat warm for someone else, this was my company now, and I had only just begun. A week after my company-wide address, the board made it official, unanimous vote. Interim no longer. Amelia Connors, CEO. There was no press conference, no ribbon cutting. Just a formal announcement, a signed contract, and a digital plaque on the company website. It was quiet, and yet, monumental. Maya brought champagne to the office that evening. She stood in the doorway, grinning with tears in her eyes. You did it, she said. After everything they tried to take from you, you still got here. I stared at the bottle she held and blinked slowly. I didn't get here because of them, I said. I got here in spite of them. We toasted anyway. Quietly. Just the two of us, surrounded by the glow of city lights and a future that finally belonged to me. But even victories come with shadows. That same night, Sylvia called. Her voice was tight. I just got word. Your father has filed a wrongful dismissal suit against Connors Holdings. I sighed. Of course he did. He's accusing you of a personal vendetta, weaponizing your new position. Claims emotional distress, career sabotage, and reputational harm. I leaned back in my chair. Reputational harm he caused himself. Doesn't matter, Sylvia replied. The media will spin it. He's already giving interviews. Pity pieces. Painting himself as the misunderstood builder of a company stolen by an ambitious daughter with a grudge. I laughed, dryly. He's nothing if not consistent. He's also dangerous, she added. And vengeful. Be ready. What Richard Connors didn't know was that I had prepared for this moment like a general preparing for war. I had all his statements, all his directives to cover up Damien's activity, and even a signed memo where he pressured our accounting team to smooth over quarterly losses. I'd held back on releasing them, hoping he might accept accountability and step back, but now, I'd play every card. 2 days later, I released a personal letter to the press. Not from Connors Holdings. Not from a lawyer, from me.it. Read my name is Amelia Connors, and I've worked at this company since I was 24. I built one of its only profitable divisions. I watched my ideas be credited to others, my name removed from press releases, my expertise dismissed in board meetings. I stayed because I believed in the people here, the ones who showed up every day to build something real. But when I uncovered misconduct, I was faced with a choice: stay silent to protect a family name, or speak up to protect what we've all built. I chose truth. That choice came at a cost, but not as high as the cost of letting abuse go unchecked. Let this be a new chapter, where leadership means accountability, and loyalty means doing what's right, even when it's hard. To those who doubted me, I forgive you. To those who tried to destroy me, I see you. And to those who still believe in building something better, let's get to work. The letter went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Suddenly, I wasn't just the CEO of Connors Holdings. I was being interviewed on finance podcasts, quoted in op-eds about women in leadership, and invited to speak at tech summits, and that terrified my father. His legal case was quietly withdrawn 2 weeks later. No press release. No apology, just silence. That was his final play. Disappear. Pretend he hadn't lost, but I had, and it wasn't revenge I felt. It was peace, the kind you get when you stop chasing closure and start building boundaries. In the weeks that followed, the air inside Connors Holdings changed. The tension that once hung in the halls like fog began to lift. People smiled more. Meetings started on time, and ended with decisions that didn't involve backroom whispers. For the first time in a decade, the company felt honest, but beneath that progress was something else: grief, not for my father or brother. Not even for the company as it once was, but for the version of myself I had to bury to get here, because becoming CEO hadn't been the dream. Not really. My dream had always been to build something of my own, with people who saw me, not someone I had to prove myself to every hour of every day. The title was a battle trophy, yes, but it came with wounds. That's when I started therapy. At first, I told myself it was for leadership development. Emotional resilience, I called it, but in my second session, I broke down. I spent my whole life trying to be useful, I said, voice cracking. As a daughter. As a sister. As an employee. I thought if I worked hard enough, they'd finally see me. The therapist nodded gently. And now that you've succeeded? I stared at her. I don't know what to do with it. Success is complicated when you've been conditioned to feel unworthy of it. When every milestone comes with a voice in your head whispering, they only gave you this to avoid guilt. But slowly, I began rewriting that narrative. I started recognizing my value didn't come from comparison or compliance. It came from the woman who'd risen after every betrayal and kept building anyway, and part of that healing meant letting go of more than just my family. It meant choosing what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. So, I made a decision. 2 months after I officially became CEO, I stood in front of the board with a simple proposal. I want to restructure our mission. They looked confused. Curious. This company was built on extraction, of property, of power, of people. I want to rebuild it around contribution. We've made enough money. Now let's invest in something bigger than ourselves. What are you suggesting? Eleanor asked. A new initiative, I said. The Connors Foundation. We take 10% of annual profits and reinvest into affordable housing, urban sustainability, and entrepreneurship programs for women of color and working-class youth. We start with the cities our properties disrupted the most. Silence, then, slowly, a nod, and another. By the end of the vote, it passed unanimously, and for the first time in my professional life, I felt pride without performance. That night, I emailed Drew. Still think we were just waiting for better versions of ourselves? He replied within minutes, no. I think we were becoming them. After months of chaos, silence felt strange. No press calls. No lawsuits. No fires to put out. At 2 a.m. Just progress. I was spending more time in the field than in the boardroom, visiting development sites, sitting in on mentorship programs, listening to the people we'd impacted. And it reminded me why I ever got into this work in the first place. Because change wasn't supposed to be about power. It was supposed to be about people. At one of the community meetings in Oakland, a woman named Carla stood up. She had a toddler on her hip and paint flecks on her sleeves. I don't care about your family name, she said bluntly. But if you really want to help, stay consistent. Don't do this for a press headline. Do it for us. I smiled. I'm not here to be thanked, I replied. I'm here to listen. And I meant it. That night, as I walked back to my car, I saw a message from Drew, coming to Seattle next week for a project. Dinner? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I could trust what I felt, or if I was just seeking comfort after surviving hell. I texted back, dinner yes. But I need you to know, this version of me comes with scars. And I don't hide them anymore. His reply came instantly, scars mean you've healed. I want the real version, not the one who made herself small to survive. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. Dinner was easy, surprisingly so. We laughed. We argued about the ethics of vertical farming. He teased me about being the corporate rebel, and I made fun of his flannel shirt and compostable phone case. At the end of the night, he walked me back to my car, the Seattle rain misting around us. I missed this, he said softly. I missed me, too, I whispered. We didn't kiss. Not that night, but something had opened between us, something that didn't ask me to shrink or apologize. The next day, my mother called again. This time, I answered. Her voice was hesitant. Uncertain. I heard about the foundation, she said. It's noble. Is that why you called? A pause. No, she admitted. I called because I realized I never once asked you what you wanted. Not as a child. Not as a woman. Just, never asked. I waited, and finally, she said the words I thought I'd never hear, I'm sorry. There was no follow-up. No excuses. Just 2 words, raw and trembling. I didn't forgive her. Not right away, but I didn't hang up either. That, in itself, was progress, because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just choosing to answer the call, and not letting it reopen the wound. 6 months into my official role as CEO, I did something that would have terrified the younger version of me. I took a vacation. No email. No work laptop. No damage control team on standby. Just me, a passport, a hiking backpack, and a 2-week trek through Patagonia. The mountains didn't care about my title, the rivers didn't care about my family name, and for the first time, I started to understand something that had eluded me. For most of my life, my value didn't come from being useful to other people. It came from being whole. Even when no one was watching. Even when no one clapped. When I got back, I found a letter on my desk, handwritten. Crisp cream stationery from Damien. Amelia, you probably won't believe anything I write. And honestly, I don't blame you. But I need you to hear this. I was jealous. I always have been. You were the one Dad actually feared, even if he didn't say it. He saw your competence and it threatened him. So he did what he always did, he tried to crush it before it could rise. I followed his example because I didn't know how to be anything else. What I did was wrong. I know that now. You were never the problem. I was. Whatever happens next, I hope you do something better with the Connor's name than any of us ever did. No return address. No ask for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I sat with it for a long time, and then I put the letter away. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally understood something crucial. I didn't need closure from the people who broke me. I had built it myself, and the life I was living now, one rooted in authenticity, truth, and power earned, not inherited, was the only proof I needed. In the fall, the Connors Foundation broke ground on its first affordable housing project. We named it the Phoenix. Someone asked me why. I smiled and said, because ashes are just the beginning. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Drew stood beside me, his hand finding mine as cameras flashed and volunteers cheered. He didn't pose. He didn't smile for press. He just looked at me and whispered, "You did it." And for the first time, I believed it, not because of the headline, not because of the title, but because I was no longer trying to prove anything. I was just being who I had always been, powerful, resilient, and finally, free.